Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Sparesbox. Today we're back in the shop with the good old Sentry. We've finally got that thing registered, so it's taken quite a while to actually get it through compliance. Basically, everything's been held up because of COVID. As silly as a thing as it sounds, is the actual compliance plate and the VIN tag are made in Victoria, and the company that makes those, because they're not made by the government, they're obviously outsourced to a private company, they were closed and they've had sort of all sorts of flow-on effects, and there was a delay in making all those products and parts. So literally because of a sticker and a tag, we haven't been able to drive this thing for about 8 weeks. But it's finally all here, it's on, it's registered. So now the fun part, we can start prepping it for a road trip. So that's what we're gonna do today. Basically go through it and give it a pretty good service and a check over. We're gonna do some brakes as well. We've got a full stack of parts over here from Sparesbox. And we've also got some genuine parts. Some of the stuff we weren't actually able to find through aftermarket channels as yet. These things are pretty new to Australia. There's literally about 10 of them here. So I highly doubt anyone's gonna be able to ring up their parts supplier or jump online and go through their parts supplier and find parts as yet. I have been able to work out a lot of stuff crosses over to the 20 series Celsior or LS400, including brakes. All of the suspension componentry is very similar to a Celsior or LS400. Spark plugs, we could cross-reference to a Denso part number, so pretty stoked to be able to buy those locally. We got those through PAT, they're also available through Sparesbox. And pollen filters and stuff we've crossed over as well. And interestingly, the pollen filter is actually the same as the IS200, so we've ordered one of those. That'll actually be turning up this morning as well, so we can get that in. The one thing that did really annoy me though regarding pollen filters is when this thing came in and when they cleaned it for quarantine at the dock, they actually threw the whole pollen filter tray out. In these, when you buy a new pollen filter, it doesn't come with the tray, so I've had to order that genuine from Toyota. Luckily that appears to be a common part as well. I got a parts catalogue online and I found the correct part numbers and ordered them through our local dealer, and most of those parts turned up in a couple of days, so they're obviously common to other cars. But we'll kick it off with a bit of a brake upgrade or brake service, and we'll keep going from there. And this bonnet's heavy. One of the gas struts are half dead. Oversized novelty car. This thing's long. It's alright, these screwdrivers have warranty. Oh look, that's how a screw's supposed to work. Yeah, that's another one. That's gonna snap or have to get drilled out. We've already hit our first hurdle on these, and a lot of Toyota models actually use screws to locate the disc to the hub. I'm not really sure why they do that, because the wheel clamps the disc to the hub anyway, and then obviously the studs go through the disc. But it is what it is. All of those have either been cross-threaded or seized in the hub, so what I've quickly done is just drilled the heads off them. I'm hoping that once we get the disc off, we can either get some vice grips on there or give it some sort of penetrating spray and hopefully work them out. But super worst case, we can actually just cut those off flush and grind them back. And then that'll mean we can keep going with the job. Like I said, I'm not too fussed about it. I may order the genuine screws from Toyota, because you can't use an aftermarket screw, because they're actually basically a flat back screw that then bottoms out in the disc. So they're quite a short head. And obviously that's the reason they've used a Phillips head drive in them, but as a result of that, the material is fairly soft, and those Phillips head drives strip out pretty quickly, even using just hand tools with no power tools or anything. So yeah, we've just drilled those heads off, and we'll continue with the job. Twing! I did have a slight fail in ordering some parts today. It appears that these run brake pad wear indicators. Luckily though, this thing is about to eat the sensor, but it hasn't yet. So what I'm going to do in this case is actually transfer it across to the new pads, and then I'll do some research to see if we can buy these new, either genuine or aftermarket. But because there's no brake pad warning light on the dash at the moment, it basically means that these are still functioning okay. So they just unclip from the pad, they're nice and simple, and the new pads do have provision for those same sensors, so we're just going to unclip them and swap them over to the pad. But it is worth mentioning to check your car for these sort of things before you do go ordering parts. In my haste, I didn't even think that these things may run pad sensors, but evidently they do. So yeah, we'll definitely dig into this later and see what we can find. But because the warning light hasn't come on yet, these sensors will be okay to use again. I figured while we're here, I'd give a very basic rundown of how these pad sensors actually work. So basically, the car sends either a voltage or a ground signal, depending on the configuration of the particular vehicle, through the wire. It's just a two-pin setup, so you run basically, it's an in and out system, not a two in and no sort of return. So it runs down the cable through to your wear pad, and this just has little copper strands in it, and when it gets to the critical point, it actually rubs through those copper strands and breaks the circuit, and that's what actually brings the light up on your dash. So it's a super simple system, and after you look at it, you can understand why these are a single use, or you can reuse them if they haven't broken, but basically once it breaks that circuit, they're not really repairable. Most brake companies do actually offer these aftermarket now as well, so rookie error on my part, but luckily we can reuse these, so we'll jam them in. As part of changing brake pads in a car with a slide style caliper, you really should be removing the slides from the caliper, giving them a good clean, and then giving them the light grease. This is very commonly overlooked on cars, and it can lead to premature pad wear or uneven pad wear. Basically, the caliper actually moves on these pins, or moves that way on these pins, and during the sort of natural wear process of the pads, the caliper will move closer to the disc, and that basically means that both the inner and the outer pad on a single piston or a two piston style sliding caliper will wear evenly. When these things do bind up or seize, you'll find that you'll eat one pad. You'll probably eat the outer pad more so than the inner pad, or you can basically just chew one corner off the pad. The pads we pulled out of this did look pretty square. It's yeah, really good practice to clean and lube these every time you're doing pads. Yeah, water in the face. Let's see if my guess on an air filter was right. Yeah, buddy. I know in the intro I did say that we were going to do the spark plugs and the accessory belt today. Having a quick look at the car, it's pretty clear we're going to need other parts to actually do that job. Absent-mindedly of myself, I was just like, yeah, cool, we'll whack the plugs in, but having a look at it, obviously the plugs are actually under the top half of the inlet manifold. I don't have those gaskets to actually be able to refit the inlet manifold, so rather than potentially have to put it back together with sealant or broken gaskets or a combination of both, I've decided that we're going to put off the plugs until we can get some genuine gaskets. Also with the accessory belt, A, the one that's on it doesn't look too bad, but B, we have to pull out a fair bit of stuff to change it. So part of that, doing this is the coolant flush, but I don't want to do the coolant flush until we've done the inlet manifold replacement or remove and refit, because more likely than not, the throttle body is going to have, or the throttle bodies are going to have coolant running to them. So I'd rather just do the job once rather than kind of having to redo bits and pieces. So we'll be chucking these suckers in a later video. We're also going to do a transmission service with a filter replacement. So we'll more or less split this today into kind of a minor service and some brakes. And then the next video will be doing like the trans service and the plugs and the accessory belt and the coolant flush and some other bits and pieces, no doubt, that we'll need by then. But we'll keep cracking along. But I did want to explain that because people may go, oh, you didn't put the plugs in, why didn't you do that? So that's the reason. It's going to hold like a lot of oil, hey? Look how big the fitting is on the oil filter housing. It's like a truck motor. It's like 19 mil, no worries. I said 3/4 of an inch. People don't like when I use imperial measurements. I don't know why. Probably because it's backwards. Not yet. See ya. So we've got the car back together and now it's all driving. Obviously, you need to bed your brakes in. Both the pads and the discs need to be bed in. Obviously, it's not really a good idea to do it in a residential area or a high traffic area. So we've come out of town a little bit. This is a 100k/hour limited road, so we're definitely going to be able to do the speeds we need to bed brakes in. So basically now we're going to do 4 or 5 runs up and down the road, obviously make sure there's no other traffic around, and do stops. So basically you want to apply the brakes fairly heavily at about 80 kilometers an hour and slow to 20, but don't stop completely, and do that sort of 4 or 5 times. However, you do want to sort of let it cool between applications. You don't want to be just sort of on and off the brakes because you'll warp your brand new discs, and that's not going to be a good time for anyone. So we're basically just going to do a couple of runs up and down the road. Like I said, it's a 100k road, so there's no problem with us doing 80k's an hour up and down here. It's not super busy, so yeah, we're not going to be sort of hindering anyone, and we are going to make sure there's no one behind us before we do take off, so that, like I said, we're not going to sort of cause any dramas for anyone, and that also minimises the risk of any accidents or whatever. So let's get to it. A lot of you guys probably will have noticed that I painted the center of the front discs. The reason that is because the front discs from Brembo don't come coated. The rear discs, which are RDA discs, have a special coating on them. However, if you don't treat them or paint them, the center of the disc goes just rusty and not particularly nice looking. I also didn't go to the effort of masking the disc surface or anything like that. And you can see why now, since we've gone and bedded the brakes in, you can see a super neat line where exactly where the pad runs, and anywhere where the pad doesn't run is now painted. So going forward now, we won't get corrosion built up on the head of the disc, and it'll look nice for, well, for the life of the disc, really it should. We did use a heat rated paint. Generally we actually use that same paint on exhausts and things like that, so it's definitely going to be up to the task of the heat. These calipers are actually painted in the same paint as well, so yeah, there should be no problems going forward with that. But yeah, just thought we'd sort of explain why and how we do some of the things sort of that we don't cover all the time. So I think we painted the hats of discs a couple of times on camera and probably not really gone through it and explained why. But now you guys can see exactly how and why we do it. So it yeah, gives a nice finish, and it's super clean and neat and doesn't rust. We've now got the Sentry all road trip ready. We've got the brakes done, we've done our service, we've checked it over, it's all looking pretty good. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do everything we had planned today, mainly because some of those jobs are actually going to require more parts, which unfortunately are genuine only from Toyota. And during the course of the day, I messaged our local dealer. Unfortunately, those are not available through the Toyota Australia network, so we'll have to order those from Japan. Don't forget, guys, if you are on Sparesbox, use BCW5 upon checkout. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.